What is going on, everybody? Today, we are back with another Origin Story podcast. We have an amazing guest, which we'll talk about here shortly. He's an amazing human being. He's somebody who I've got a chance to interact with on a personal level, and really just a good soul, a good human being, and excited to share his story and actually learn a little bit more about his story as well. And we'll kind of get into all the cool accolades and how he runs multiple six-figure a month businesses, which if you translate that into is like $1 million a year businesses, multiple, not just one, and lots of unique businesses and different businesses, but they all actually tie in together and create one vertical, which is the reason that he's growing his wealth and his income at the pace that he is. And also, he's quite the wheeler and dealer, which we'll talk about a little bit as we get in this interview. Guy can drive really, really well. And without further ado, Sam, if you want to lead us in here, let's rock and roll, my friend.
Yeah, Logan, thank you. Cody, this is the origin story where we want to hear about everything that resulted in you being who you are, right? We know that a lot of times people, they see the glitz and the glamour, they see the mansions and the mansions, they see the fancy cars, they see, you're doing 7 figures a year, multiple 7 figures a year. And while that stuff is inspiring, it can tend to be sometimes a little bit unrelatable. And what we want to do is we want to provide or instill in people long-standing impact. And Pace actually taught me this, that long, meaningful impact that sticks with you and drives you to some form of consistent action is through, a lot of times it's through relatability. And so what we quickly find is that people, while they can be inspired by the success, they can actually relate to and cling on in a more meaningful fashion the journey that took you, right? The journey that was required for that success.
Right. Love it. Well, I'm excited, guys.
Yeah. So Cody, if you don't mind, I've listened to a few interviews of yours, and you talk about how you had this this feeling, whether it was a natural feeling or whether it was a like you just knew that being financially independent was important to you at a young age. And so you talk a little bit about your upbringing, how you didn't come from a ton of money. You talked a little bit about your how your family actually experienced the 2008, 2009, 2007, 2008, 2009 crash, and like how you kind of like saw a lot of big changes in your household. So kind of tell me a little bit about like why or where you think that was it a natural instinct or was it an experiential situation that happened for you to like have this drive to want to be successful?
Yeah, for sure. So, well, I think one of the things was when I was young, like literally like 8, 9, 10 years old, my dad, he owns a carpet tile, cleaning business and, some other hard services as well. But essentially my, upbringing, my parents didn't just give me stuff. Like I would, I'd get stuff, birthday gifts or like things for, Christmas, whatever, like a normal, like middle class, kid would. But when it came to like anything above and beyond that, it was kind of like up to me to have to earn it. And the way that I had to earn it typically was going and working for my dad. So that was, from a boy to, my early teenage years, going with my dad out to his jobs, rolling out the hoses and, scrubbing grout and, pulling the slack for him, setting up the chemicals, doing those sorts of things when I was really young. And so that's how I made money. And I was able to do some of the things with my friends that I wanted to do. And I definitely had a chip on my shoulder going into my teenage years because I had some friends that were more spoiled where their parents would just buy them like whatever they wanted and they could do whatever they wanted. Down to like, getting their first car. Like, I had a lot of friends at the school I went to that got like new cars and like I couldn't afford to buy myself a new car, and so my parents helped me out a little bit, but I had to save majority of the money. And like my first car was literally $3,700. So it's like not like it was like an expensive car. It was a Jeep Cherokee. And so, but through that, I figured I'm like, man, like, I just want to make a lot of money because I want to be able to experience the things that some of my friends were able to have. And, I had some friends that, they lived in like crazy houses when I was a teenager. And I'm like, I got some glimpses of like what, I guess the good life and like living in a mansion could be like, from a couple of friends. And I'm like, man, like, what are they doing? I'm like, I want to do that. That sounds like the thing. And so, I was always doing little like entrepreneurial things. One of my first things was um, when I was 16. I don't know if you or anyone, listening will recall like the power balance bracelets. That it was like, oh, if you wear this bracelet, it'll make you stronger and make you have better balance and that sort of thing. So they were really popular in the town in Gilbert, Arizona that I was growing up in. And so I found a place to buy those online in China, and I'm like, they sell retail for $30. And so I found a place in China that just had overstock of them, and I was buying them for 97 cents a band. And so
Wow.
I was buying, I would buy like 100 of those a month, and then I'd go sell them all for like $20 or $25, or I'd find like a couple kids to sell like 10 of them to for $10 each. And then I would, have a couple distributors of other kids selling them. And so that was one of my first ventures, and, spent all the money like a dumb 16-year-old would on, subwoofers for my Jeep and, dumb stuff. So essentially,
awesome.
yeah. So that was kind of one of the initial things. And then what kind of led from there was when I turned 17, the way I was raised was in the household was, when you're in school, you either have a job or you play a sport. And that's your option. There's no, you just hang out after school and get into trouble, basically. So I was playing sports until my junior year of high school, and I injured my knee playing soccer. And so I'm like, well, I can't really do sports, so I have to get a job. So and I didn't want to do a job because I had just done, selling those bracelets, and I was making, like $1,500 or like my biggest month, I made like $2,000. And I'm like, I'm not even working. So,
Yeah.
so I basically, out of force from my parents are like, you have to go get a job. That's just what it is. I'm like, all right. So I went and I worked at McDonald's, and then I was a sign spinner. So I had 2 jobs. And I did that for a little while. Long story short, just to not go too long on a tangent here, but my sister came home one day and gave me this drink that was, associated with a network marketing company. And she shows me like this opportunity video for this company, and like how you can make money, selling these and recruiting people. And I'm just like, this is my ticket out of McDonald's and out of the sign spinning thing. So without really knowing much, I decided to like get started, bought some product from that company called Vima. And, I just went ham with it. I recruited a lot of kids. Like I was making like $3,000 a month before I graduated high school. So I was just like, I ain't going to college. Like I was so convicted because I joined that. I read all of Robert Kiyosaki's books, literally every single one as a senior. I read The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and I just got absorbed into the personal development world. Jim Rohn, Les Brown, a lot of the greats. And so I was just like, there's no reason I should go to college. So literally from like 4 months into this thing, 5 months into this thing, I dropped my math class that was required to go to college my senior year. And then I dropped like some other like English class or something like that was like a prep class for college. And I was like, I'm done. I ain't doing it. I'm not going to college anyway. I'm going to get rich doing, business. And I didn't even tell my parents when I just dropped the classes. I'm like, I'm out. I'm not doing it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So I did that, and, ended up, long story short, for that business, I spent a little over 4 years building within that company. And, from at 18, I, made over $100,000. And I was just like, I thought I was the coolest thing since sliced bread, honestly, at that time. And, was living the really stupid lifestyle of like, buy every Louis Vuitton thing I could, have 2 cars, sure, have a BMW and a Jeep, and live in an expensive townhome. It's like, but I didn't have any financial education at that point. I just knew how to work hard and to do the thing. And so over those years, I built teams in, Europe. I spent 6 months in in Europe, building teams in Norway and Sweden, and, going to conventions, setting up conventions in other states, other countries. So I learned a lot of my lessons and a lot of things from that company. And I had mentors that were, career network marketers, but they were, career businessmen and women. And so I had a ton of great foundations that came from that experience. And the thing that kind of shifted everything, though, was it was 2015. And I, still making great money, just living my life. And I had a big ego at that time too, because I was just, you give an 18-year-old, great money, and then just, just living and doing whatever the heck you want and just acting like a fool, but working really hard, but acting like a fool outside of that. That's just what kind of happens. And so got to the point where literally on a Thursday, that company Vima just shuts down their, just the affiliate program just like collapses. And so I'm used to, at that time, every Thursday, literally every Thursday morning, I would get a deposit anywhere from $2 to $4 grand in my bank account. And so I was just like, I'm good. And that Thursday, no deposit. And I'm like, I'm living above my means, like ridiculous. Like, I just stupid, like spending everything that I'm making, except I paid my taxes. I didn't make that mistake, but spending everything that I made. And so what happened is I obviously that, occurring, I was like, crap, I need to figure out what the heck to do quickly. So like I fire sold the brand new Jeep I bought, lost like 20 grand on it, fire sold the BMW I had, lost like 10 grand on that. I was living in a house at that time, like a 3,700 square foot house with a couple of friends, and like had to break the lease there, literally moved back to my parents. And I had, from all the negative debt that I had from the cars, I literally had to sell everything down to my bed frame and mattress just to get to zero. It's like, because it's easy to go negative in this day and age. And so just to get to zero and then move back home with my parents, ego death, number one, was a huge thing. And then two, I was just like, I am a financial idiot. I am an idiot. Just because I had a lot of reflection at that time. And I don't know if you wanted to ask a question, but I know I'm just like rambling.
No, it's amazing. So, and how old were you when that happened? When
it all falling down, I was 21.
You're 21. So that was in this. And then when did you start your first business where you bought the bracelets and you sold them? When did that start?
I was 16.
So between 16 and 21. So you basically invented Amazon automation, right? You took something.
Yeah, not knowing what I was doing. I was just like, literally the website was dhgate.com. Maybe they still exist. I don't know, but I just.
So your parents, sounds like they didn't recognize that as a job, right?
No.
And so you went and you worked at McDonald's.
Yep.
And what made them believe that this opportunity with Vima was a better opportunity than you selling bracelets? Is that just because your sister was doing it, that it had more credibility behind it?
So with that, I had to do it on the side of working at McDonald's and doing the sign spinning. And the agreement was, if I can be making it was like 1.5 times, I think, as much money doing the network marketing thing as I was at McDonald's and sign spinning, I was allowed to quit those jobs.
I see.
So that became my goal, was how do I get there as quickly as possible?
And so you talked a little bit about your dad owning, you say it was a tile company or a carpet?
Yeah, carpet cleaning, tile cleaning, grout, tile, sealing and all that.
And so sounds like he was maybe more like a solopreneur, like had like maybe like a couple guys work for him, but he was
quadrant for sure. Yeah. He's doing all the things, wearing all the hats. Basically, is what even to this day, that's still what he's doing.
How do you think that plays into what your goals were, seeing that, obviously living that, and then at the same time, did you ever question when you went over to your friend's house and they had maybe the nicer stuff, the bigger homes, and did you were you inquisitive and what did they do? And then did that help you kind of pick your path that you wanted to go down when it came to picking a career, I guess you would call it?
Yeah. So I was always too shy to ask them what they did for a living. Because I'm more of an introvert by nature, and so I just was always kind of too shy to ask him. But I was just like, I just knew that that's the way that I wanted to live. I'm like, this is different. I want to live like this, you know. And I just knew, I'm like, you know, the ways that, you know, you get at that time at my, you know, age of like 15, 16, it's like, you know, not a broad understanding of like business. I'm like, well, you know, I guess you're either like a doctor or like in business of some sort to make a bunch of money, or you're like a, you know, awesome athlete, which I'm like, I'm a good athlete, but I'm not going to, you know, go pro in anything. And I hate school. So another 8 years of school after I graduate high school doesn't sound like a good path for me. So I'm like, I guess business it is.
That's amazing. And so from the time you were 16, you started your first business, had some success, worked at McDonald's, worked as a science spinner, and then went and did this network marketing gig. And obviously we're very successful. I believe you built like a team of like 2,000 people below you, right? Something crazy.
Yeah, I had like just under 2,200 at the peak.
Freaking insane, dude. Like that is so cool. And all
I
before
was
21, right? Like
yeah.
how crazy is that?
Yeah, like there was, you know, and I've never actually done the math of it because I never really like was, you know, that intuitive, I guess, at that time. But I'm like, when I think about it, there's 2,200 people with an average order size of about $150. So basically 330,000 a month in revenue that, you know, my organization is bringing in.
Wild, man. Wild. And so as that company folded for whatever reason, like I don't know if that's something you want to talk about, or if it's just like that's just what it is. I'm not sure if there's like a cool story behind that, but
not super cool story. It's kind of boring, actually.
fair. We'll just assume that it just folded for, you know, for whatever reason that business is folded. And so you were banking on this money, and how describe that feeling that you were like on top of the world, young 21 kid, like, you know, naive probably, and now you had to go back home probably to and face your dad, who probably was telling you like, you should watch out for this, right? It was probably pointing your finger, most likely someone who's a solopreneur. Like, describe kind of the thought process, the feelings, maybe some of the conversations that were going on, maybe externally and even internally as well.
Yeah. I mean, from all of it kind of falling apart and going home, like I had people sending me like hate messages from like, because it got pretty big in the area of town that I was in. So I had people just like, when everything, you know, fell apart there, people were just like, I told you so, you idiot, should have went to school, you know. So I got a lot of hate you know, at that time. And then, you know, going back to my parents, it was very deflating because the girlfriend that I had at that time, we were living together. And so I was like, well, we got to go to my parents. I'm broke. Sorry. And so that, you know, is obviously very discouraging. And, you know, from just being in such a place of like finances, like I just kind of lived and did whatever I wanted. So then like I can't do really anything at all that I want, was really, really discouraging. And that ego death, which now is one of the most things that I'm most grateful for, but at the time was tragic, was just having, you know, I feel like it's like a message from God, just like slapping me like freaking dummy, you know, this is what you get for being a butthole and, you know, having a big ego. And so that was the conversations with my parents are like, you need to get your finances, you know, figured out, like you're freaking idiot. Like, you know, over those 4 years, I probably brought in close to 400 something $1,000, and I had nothing to show for it whatsoever besides like 10 pairs of Louis Vuitton shoes and some Louis Vuitton belts and Gucci bags and, you know, freaking dumb stuff like that. Which I still have today. I never wear any of it, but I just can't get myself to get rid of it. I'm just like, I spent too much money on this. And yeah, so, but essentially, you know, my parents actually, they told me, they're like, you need to like learn finance management. And so I actually went through Dave Ramsey's Financial Peace University and like at least established like kind of like the bucket system of managing money and kind of just like some foundational pieces to it. I really think Dave Ramsey is for people that want to be average. And, you know, I think it's great for people that want to just be average and just like not be a total screw up and just be wrecked financially. I think it's great. If you want to be wealthy, it's not the way to go. But I think for foundations, it's a good place to be to start, but immediately exiting as soon as you have some of those foundational principles. And so that really helped give me some guidance. But to be honest, like I got my real estate license, you know, during that immediately, like within, a month of all that happening, I had my real estate license, and I was pretty depressed really for like 6 months. Like I was just down and just like borderline suicidal at points of just like, how did I screw up my life? Like, did I just make the worst decision of my life? But I had so many great lessons and a lot of great relationships from it. So like, it was just a period of really a lot of reflection, being back at my parents' house with the girlfriend at that time, and just like, man, like what the heck was I doing? So there was,
What led you to real estate? So in that time frame, you were obviously doing multi-level marketing, had nothing to do with real estate. What was real estate something that like popped up? Was it something that was always in the back of your head? Like, was it from Rich Dad Poor Dad reading Kiyosaki that you like, I kind of knew that was the path I wanted to go down eventually? Like, where did that come from?
So there's a few catalysts to that. One, I literally remember driving down the road in the back of my mom's car when I was like maybe 12 or 13, and she was listening to Darren Hardy recording, and she was talking about how he was a millionaire in his 20s, and I was like, millionaire in your 20s? What? And she was like, yeah, and he did real estate. And I'm like, real estate, interesting. And so then, I got into the Robert Kiyosaki books a little bit later on. I was like 16, 17, and then it just became a pretty clear path. And my mom was working as a nurse, but she also had a real estate license and did some, selling on the side of that. And so I was like, that seems like a good thing. And so I'm like, I want to invest in real estate. So I'm going to get my real estate license, which is, now knowing that's a stupid idea, but that's all I knew. I'm like, I was working with what I knew. So that's what I did. I got my license, and that was the beginning.
So first and foremost, guys, I gotta say I'm so sorry. My entire house blacked out. But I'm back. I'm back, and I'm glad that I'm here. I want to ask this from just in terms of timeline, from the time where you had to move back with your parents, and right, that's it's like a humbling moment a lot, and it's one of those things where I know that it can, because I've had to go through something a little bit similar in the past, and I know that you have to be there, you have to go back and kind of live and just kind of own up to the fact that not everything you thought was going to happen, not everything that you thought was going to happen happened. And how long did it take from you? Like, how long were you in that phase? This phase where you basically have to bounce back from you moving back in with the parents to saying, okay, I'm going to fix this. Real estate might be the answer, but I'm going to bounce back like right now.
Yeah. So within about 8 months, there's 6 months of depression, but I was still working through it. I basically was just working my guts out every day, like starting as an agent, like just grueling, like open houses, like every day, sitting in the open houses, following up with leads, like literally just grunt work, grinding, cold calling. I cold called, 4 hours a day minimum, and then just doing open house. I was literally just working like a grunt, but I was super depressed. And so that was like 6 months. And so I made enough money over that first like 6-8 months to where I was able to buy a townhome for me to be able to at least move into. And thankfully, since I had the good 1099s from the network marketing, I was still able to get a loan, even though it was real estate. I don't know how my loan officer got it done for me, but I was pretty happy. But so basically was able to buy a townhome, and that was a really good catalyst to get out of that freaking house with my parents. And so literally just had to rebuild, in 8 months, I made enough money to do that, moved into this new spot, literally had to buy a mattress, and just threw a mattress on the floor in my master bedroom with their girlfriend at the time. And I'm like, all right, I'm rebuilding. Like, I'm just hustling. So like, I just grunt worked it out, joined a coaching program for real estate agents at that time. And, thought I did the house hacking thing where I rented 2 of the bedrooms. There's a 3-bed house. So I rented 2 of the bedrooms. So I'm like, I'm going to reduce my expenses so I can increase my income as quickly as possible and reduce what I'm spending. And so basically, rented 2 rooms out for $800 total a month. My mortgage was $957 a month at that place, so it was really low. And so I was able to live very cheaply, and just hustled. Like I lived, breathed real estate agent, listings, working with buyers, and just literally learning as much as I possibly could to try to rebuild as much as I could as fast as I could at that point.
What what became your goal after that? So it sounds like you were making money before with the network marketing, and it doesn't sound like you actually had a goal because you were spending everything, right?
Yeah.
And so like
Oh,
when
yeah.
you lost everything and then you started to rebuild, like were you focused on a specific number? Like what was like I guess what were you chasing at that time?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting thing because I didn't expect this, but like, so one of the things that happened when I got to the point where I was making six figures in the network marketing company, I got to this, like, that was like the ultimate, like that was my goal. And so
Yeah.
once I got there, I got really, honestly, I got very unmotivated and discouraged and honestly depressed again. Like I've
You know,
definitely had some series of depression and I still struggle with anxiety to this day. But at that time, I that's where I think I was just consuming and doing all these other things because I didn't have a goal at that time anymore because I reached it and I'm like, well, I obviously, next, like, hit the next rank, but it wasn't like an inspiring thing for me.
yeah,
So what changed this time was going through that experience. I'm like, I don't want to ever have that happen to me ever again for the rest of my entire freaking life. I am never moving back to my parents. Love them to death, but I'm not going to do that. I want to be so financially sound that for myself, future wife, future kids, that we're just unbreakable. And that really became the goal more than just like a number. It's just, how am I going to be so financially well off that like nothing could touch me? And one of those things was, really getting good at finance management and personal finance allocation and how I do my personal budgeting and things. And so that was really what the goal became, was not around a number, but around a mastery of finance management and cash flow management for my businesses, my business and my future businesses, and then for me personally, that's what the goal more so became about, based on then being able to live a great lifestyle at that point. And so really at that point it was just like, I got to rebuild quickly as fast as I possibly can, because I really screwed this thing up, and just to not do the same thing. And really it was just a lot of like character things that I wanted to work on, where I'm like, I'm never going to have a big ego again, because
yeah,
that was, the ego is the enemy. There's a great book about that, but that's what I think led to the downfall of being stupid. Because when you have an ego, you think you're the best thing in the world. You stop looking at your blind spots, and you stop looking at the areas that you can actually have to improve, and you stop asking for feedback, and you stop being coachable. And so all of those things start to happen, you're going to start to decline.
yeah. And so we got into retail real estate, right? Because
Yep.
that's where you were at. And so where was that transition where you started to look at more of the investing standpoint and then even the wholesaling standpoint? Like where did that transition happen?
Yeah. So I obviously got my real estate license. I'm like, I'm going to invest in real estate. So I'm getting my real estate license. And so after about a year and a half of just, it was probably almost 2 years of just selling houses, like doing listings, working with buyers. I did relatively well. Like I wouldn't say I was like a top performer. Like the first, year of that, I sold like 18 houses, and then I was selling like 30 houses a year after that. So like I was reasonably doing a good job. I'm not a naturally born salesperson, but I am a grinder. Like I am a grunt worker. Like I'm not scared to just like bang my head against the wall all day.
Yeah,
And, while someone else is going to, maybe go get 1 or 2 out of 10, listings, and maybe I need to get, it takes me 20 to get that same result. I'm gonna go get the same, but I'm just gonna have to do a lot more of them, and I'm just gonna have to hustle. So
yeah,
that's that was essentially what was kind of going on. And at that about year and a half point, I started building a little bit of a team. I had another agent, and then I had an assistant that was doing my my showings for my buyers. And honestly, I just got to a point where I'm like, I got back to making, I made like 150 grand that year or something, and I was like, I'm not happy. And I'm like, I don't think doing more of what I'm doing is going to get me to where I want to be. I'm not building cash flow. I'm on this transaction, roller coaster of just having to run transactions. And so I realized, I'm like, I took a few months to attempt to do my traditional business and do wholesaling at the same time. and had very little success. I did like one deal within 3 months on the wholesale side while I was still doing a few deals a month traditionally. And I was like, it just kind of felt like one of those things where it was like, I'm giving two things separate attention, and I really just need to burn. You notice in my story, there's a lot of burning the boats that goes on. So it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I just, I was just like, you know what? I'm just done. And so I literally told my assistant, and it was like the hardest thing I've ever done, probably professionally, was firing my first assistant, because it was like out of like my own personal happiness of like, I need to pursue something else that's going to give me joy. And then the other agent working with me, I'm like, I'm out, like I'm done with this. And so I just literally went all in on wholesaling. I'm like, I'm going to succeed. And that was it. I'm like, I'm going to succeed with this. And that's it.
And what age were you in that? So you started retail real estate as an agent at 21. What age was it when you said goodbye to that?
I was like 24.
24. It's about
I'm 28 now.
Yeah.
One question that I have though, is that into the world of investing, is you're super smart, and like you can just tell just by hearing how you articulate things. And I've been following you for such a long time now. You've got a great ability to systematize things, automate things, and I know that you're phenomenal at figuring things out. But in the beginning of making that transition from the traditional side of things to the investing side, did you ever have like a mentor to help you out?
So starting off, like I guess, because working as a real estate agent, like there's a couple things that I did that like I kind of started learning some where, the first fix and flip I did was like in the first year of being an agent. And it was because I was, I had a friend that I knew from the network marketing company. His dad flipped a bunch of houses. He owned 30 properties. And I'm like, that sounds cool. So I had him set me up to meet with his dad. And I was like, how do I do this? And he's like, well, there's 3 parts to a deal. And because I was like, how do I do deals with you? And he's like, there's 3 parts to a deal. He's like, you either have the money, you have the deal, or you have the management. And I was like, well, I don't have any money to do that. And I was like, I don't know how to manage construction. And he's like, well, go find a deal then. And so I was like, well, where do I find a deal? And he's like, pre-foreclosures. And I'm like, how do I find pre-foreclosures? He's like, go to propertyradar.com. So I'm like, okay. And so then I just went to that website, and there's a bunch of sites where you could find them now, obviously. But this is like before there was like 100 different websites where you can find pre-foreclosures. Like a lot of people are still getting them from title companies, emailing them to them.
Nice.
So this is like one of the more niche websites at that time. And so I went on propertyradar.com, and I was just like, how do I talk to these people? And he's like, well, probably just go door knock. And I'm like, okay. So I just went and started door knocking like every week, and eventually, and I would basically just like fumble through a conversation that I didn't know what I was talking about on, or like, they're like, I'm doing a loan mod. And I'm like, loan, what? I don't know anything about a loan mod. And so I'm like having these conversations, just like, yeah, I could help you. Like, and so I finally got this lady named Dawn, Crazy Dawn. Her husband was in prison for murder. And so she tells me, she's like, yeah, like, losing the house, got this other investor, telling me her story. And so I was like, oh, I can help you. And she's like, okay, well, how? And I'm like, I'm going to have Frank come by, my partner Frank's going to come by and, help you out. Cause I'm like, I didn't know what to say. So, and then afterwards, I'm like calling Frank. I'm like, Frank, this lady, she wants like 150 or 760,000 for her house. And, it's messed up. I think it's worth like the mid 200s though. And he's like, that sounds like a deal. And so I, had him come meet this lady, and there's a lot of title issues, and there's like a $60,000 baby mama lien that, was going to kill the deal. And we literally had to woo her over and meet her at this like breakfast restaurant, and, we convinced her to take a couple grand for the 60 grand. Cause it's like, dude, this guy's in jail for murder. Like he ain't getting out. Like, you want a couple of grand, or do you want us to go to foreclosure and get no grand? So that was basically the thing. And so there's a lot of hurdles on it, like everything that could go wrong during it. Like some other investor tried to snake us out of the deal after we got that lien off of it. It almost foreclosed because the title company couldn't close it on time. Basically had a heart attack, 100 times during that deal, and closed it. Got to watch it from start to finish, get, fixed and flipped. And, the house got broken into during the flips. Like I got to see a lot of the things that like go wrong pretty quickly. And I was excited. I was just like, this is sick. Like,
You're
let's go.
sold.
Yeah, I was just like, I'm gonna get rich with this stuff.
That's crazy because you basically got to see everything that could possibly ever happen all on one deal. And I want to know, so when the title company pulled when they pulled the search, I mean, did it really come up in like in an itemized way, say baby mama lien? That's what it was, right? The
Child support.
not paid lien, yeah.
The baby mama lien.
Exactly,
Yeah.
guys. Oh my God!
Yeah.
For everyone watching, at some point, you guys will run into the dreaded baby mama lien. And when you do, hit up Cody because he knows what to do.
Yeah, you have to get in touch with the baby mama, and that one was hard because the lady Dawn knew who the lady was and had her contact information, but she wouldn't share it because she's just like F that, blah. Like, you know, it's like one of those types of things. And so we had to like skip trace her, try different numbers, get a hold of her. She didn't want to meet, didn't want to talk to us, and so it was like convincing just to get her to finally meet with us and, you know, just get it along. And like all along, it's like in foreclosure, and it's like we have a ticking time bomb of like, we have 3 weeks to do this, lady. Like, freaking meet us at the Denny's. Gosh dang it, like, come on.
That's awesome. And so we were all in on wholesale, 24 years old. Explain the first couple of years of you wholesaling when you cut the cord from being a real estate agent to being a full-time wholesaler. Like, what was your strategy? What was kind of some of the thought processes? What was kind of going through your head again? Like, and where were you where were you going?
Yeah. So I saved up a decent amount of money. That's one of the things, like Pace was like, I was working with Cody and he was just like, you know, broke living on. I'm like, I owned my house and I had money saved. Like I had like 60 grand saved in the bank, but I was like, I was scared because I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. But getting started, I'm like, I don't want to go burn all of my money because I'd watched enough YouTube videos and I was listening to real estate disruptors at that time when that was super popular. And like hearing about people like burning through their money. And I'm like, okay, what could I do? Because again, like I'm like a freaking knuckle dragger. Like I'll just go and grind and work and just like, you know, even if it's not the most efficient starting out at something, like I'm just going to go and just, you know, attack it. And so I was like, well, I could drive for dollars. And so that's what I did. I'm like, I'm going to go and drive. And like now when I suggest what I was doing to people like complain. They're like, that sounds hard. And that's a lot of work. And I'm like, okay, like, well, do something else then, you know? But I literally every day, I first of all found out from investors, I'm like, where are people buying deals? Like, where should I be driving for dollars? So figured out where people wanted deals. And then every night before the next day that I was going to go drive and look for deals, I would, you know, map out. I'm like, I'm going to do these couple subdivisions. I'm going to, you know, spend, say, you know, 4 or 5 hours just out there, you know, adding addresses. There was no deal machine. There was no batch driven. There were no apps to go and put these houses on. So like I had a yellow notepad in my passenger seat and I would use this app called, I think it was like Land Glide. And so I would drive and I would use Land Glide just to find like the parcel information. So then I could find the address from the parcel. And I would write those down on my yellow notepad. And so I would just try to fill up at least one whole page before I would, you know, go home for the day. And so if it was in a really crappy neighborhood, I'd try to fill up a page and a half, but I'd fill that up. I'd go home. And pretty much from like 4 p.m. to 7, you know, pretty much every single day, I would then skip trace. There was no bulk skip tracing. That didn't exist. So I would individually on like Scipio and white pages be like skip tracing and like trying to find these people's information and be individually I would hand dial all of them until I got my first, and I got the first deal in that first month. I wasn't a great deal. I got a lot actually, because there's a bunch of trash on this lot in South Phoenix. And so I meet this lady. I'm like, all right, like I'm looking at other lots that have sold in the area. I'm like, looks like they're selling for like 50 grand. And I'm like, I talked to this lady on the phone. She's like, yeah, like I'd sell it for, after multiple times of, you know, conversing with her. She's like, I think I'd sell it for like 37,000. And I'm like, these people are buying these for 50. Hers is 37. I'm like, I can make $13,000. So I'm like, let's do this. And so I go meet with the lady. I could have negotiated it down. I was so terrified just to like lose the deal. I was just like, okay, 37, perfect, let's sign. And so then I get it signed, and now I'm freaking out because she's like telling me about all of her plans with the $37,000. She's like, yeah, I'm going to pay off my car. I'm going to bring out, help my grandma move here. And like, just literally like she had planned out where all that money was going. So I was panicking on like, I need to sell this thing. Like
that money was spent.
yeah. So I'm like, crap. So I just I look up all the other lots that had sold in the area and any new builds, because this was kind of the area that was in, and I get a hold of a couple people, and they're not wanting to give me good numbers on it. And honestly, I probably had desperation in my voice of needing to get rid of it because I didn't understand how to negotiate really at that time on these types of deals.
Yeah.
And so I I finally got to this one buyer, and they had, built literally a brand new build next door to it. And they were the ones that ended up buying it from me. And I was trying to get 50 grand from them, and they got me at 45. And then they retraded me like a few days before closing. They're like, oh no, we have to do it at 40. Otherwise we're going to back out. And so like, they just knew that they were the buyer, the only buyer I knew in the area. So they retraded me down to 40. And I was so scared to mess up this lady's plans that I just sold it and, made the 3, and, was pissed and licked my wounds and like, damn, like I should have made more on this, but I got bullied from the buyer and got too scared to drop down the seller. So
I think there's a couple things in there that you said that is really, really profound for anybody who's listening, is that like, even though you had some money in the bank, I don't know if at that time you had $60,000, but you definitely had some money in the bank, it sounds like, but you were still doing the free or the cheap lead generation. Like you're driving dollars, you weren't doing expensive marketing. I think there's something really powerful in that even though if you have the money, it doesn't mean that you should go spend the money, right?
People use it as a crutch. They go and throw money at stuff and say, I'm trying, I'm doing what I can, I'm trying it, I'm spending the money. Yeah. What I wanted to do was learn the business, because I was dedicated and committed to doing the business. I wasn't trying this out. I wasn't like, I'm going to try and make a quick buck or make some, some side money. Like, I'm like, this is what I'm doing. So I need to be good at this. And so I'm like, how can I get good at it? Like, I need to have conversations with people. I need to be, I need to get at bats at opportunities. And, I didn't want to just start throwing money when I didn't really understand like the whole dynamic of the business. And so I'm like, if I just take a lot of action and I'm spending a lot of time, I'm going to learn a lot more, is what my thought process was on it at the beginning. And so, got that deal. And then I pretty much just, cause I just, I had moved into a different townhome at that time, and I was house hacking again, renting out rooms. And like, I was living basically almost for free at this place. And so I'm like, everything that I made, I just kind of kept rolling into then marketing, which, I follow the profit first model now with all of our money management with our companies. But, starting, it worked well for me where I took that $3,000, I bought lists, and then I started texting myself when texting was like super hot, when like you could text like, 1,000, or you could text and you'd get like a 30-40% response rate, where it's like significantly less now. And so I started texting, and then that month I got one deal. I think I made like 9 or 10,000 on it. You remember the first one more in detail, but like that one. And then the next month I got this lead on a seller that had 6 properties who wanted to sell as a package. And I'm just like, I don't know how to freaking put this deal together. And so I joint ventured that deal with Carlos Reyes and Sal Secure, and, their dispo guy, Jaden Pudney. He helped me, put this deal together, and, I ended up on that one. So that was like the 3rd month, going all in. I ended up making 18 grand on that deal. So I was just like, heck yeah, like this is great. Like I, rolled 3 grand into then 9, 10. And then that, I didn't spend all of it. I still was rolling off of a small list, and, then rolled another 18 grand. And then I was just still keeping it small. And I hired my first VA at that time. And so then I had a VA doing texting for me. And then I was also texting, and, then I had leads coming from him, and I, was generating some of my own. And I basically kept like that same flow. I stopped driving for dollars at that point, because I'm like, okay, if I have some money that I've made from my efforts, so I'm going to spend, that on doing the texting and following up with those leads aggressively, and working on my skills. And so that's essentially what I did. And so then, over pretty much every month for those next like 3-4 months. Like there wasn't a month where I didn't, bring in like 20 or 30 grand. And I was spending like 4 a month. And so, but I was doing everything too.
Yep.
So I have to commend you, right, for doing it that way in the beginning, because I just graduated college and then I tried to get into this game and had no money. Like I barely had money for like gas, and that was a stretch, right? And I tried doing I started driving for dollars. And just like you, when you said like you had the yellow notepad, right, with a pen out, and you were using an app, I was literally on Google Maps, and I would like click on the little dot, and then it would bring up the address and just screenshot it.
And you're like, hopefully I clicked the right one. Like I didn't like fat finger the house next door. And I'm like, that was a really good house. I hope I got the right one.
Exactly. And then 100%. But like, I remember that. And I think I lasted, man, I've got to commend you, because I lasted like 2 days doing that. And I was like, you know what? And then it's so easy to get distracted. Like, you know what? Let's go get some Starbucks. And then you find out like 2 hours later, you're still at Starbucks, like on your phone, just chilling. And then now it's too dark. You just come up with reasons to not do it. But that stuff is a grind. So the fact that you stuck with it and then you kept smartly rolling it in the right way. And one thing I want to highlight is this, it was your second deal that you went and then you didn't know how to do it, right? It was a multi-package sale basically. And then instead of like fearing away from it, what did you do? You went and called, you called in.
I squatted up.
Dude, you squatted up. But not just with anyone.
50% of the profits too.
That's huge. But not just with anyone. You went and found some total badasses in Carlos Reyes and his team. That's huge. That's absolutely amazing. I've got to commend you for that, man. I can't, if I just looking back, I will never drive for dollars ever again.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely wouldn't either now, but I think it's a great way for people to be able to get started. And, especially, I mean, during that time I was driving, I had on just different real estate podcasts. Like I just consumed, like whenever I'm into anything, like I absorb myself. So it's like I would wake up listening to the podcast. I'd eat breakfast listening to real estate podcasts. I'd go driving for dollars listening to podcasts. I'm out doing that. I'd come home in the background while I'm doing my follow-up calls. I had different podcasts on or different YouTube videos on, real estate or motivation or business. And that was and then I would read at night. Like I was obsessed. Like I just obsessed over it. And so that was, and that's just what I figured to do. I'm like, this is how I'm going to do this. And so, and then what's interesting is then that's when, at the beginning of that next year, is when Pace and I met, because what I was doing during this time is I don't like sales. Like I don't like doing sales. So I was always trying to figure out like, how could I just partner with someone that would do like some of the sales stuff? Cause I hate this stuff. And so,
so Cody, share with the audience about the story of actually how you reached out to Pace, because he was actually on a podcast that you were listening to, right?
Because I was listening to podcasts while I was working all day, every single day. Like I'm not that, like that's no exaggeration. Like I was just consuming. And so I remember I had my dual monitors. I have the Real Estate Disruptors podcast up on my left. On my right, I had the texting platform Roar, which was one that I was using at that time. And I'm texting, and then like this Pace guy's on, and he's just like, yeah, I live in, Mesa, Arizona. And I'm like, I live in Mesa. I'm like, where are you? And so I was just, that kind of just like caught my attention a little bit. And so he's just talking. He's like, yeah, like I'm closing like 10 deals a month. And I'm like, fucking 10 deals a month. Like I'm generating leads. I'm closing like 2 to 3 a month. I'm like, and I'm stuck at this. And then I always get like retraded by my buyers, or like I don't negotiate because I'm just like, I feel bad for the old lady. So I'm going to give her more, even though I shouldn't, like, because it's stupid. But like that's what I was doing. And so I, he literally at the end of the show, like I'm just like texting, and he just like puts out his phone number. He's like, yeah, if you're in Mesa and you're doing deals, hit me up. And I'm like, and he literally put his phone number, and I'm like, yo, what? So I literally like stopped what I was doing, grabbed my phone, texted him, and I said something along the lines of like, hey Pace, my name's Cody Barton. I'm generating leads currently here in Mesa, in different areas here in Arizona. I'm not the best at closing. I would love to be able to just give you leads that I'm generating, and you can close them. You can make all the money on them, but I would just like to, learn from you on how you're doing that. And so that's what I led with. And then he texted me. He's like, oh yeah, let's get together. Let's connect tomorrow. And then like, we didn't end up connecting the next day. And then, so like a couple days went by, I texted him again. I'm like, hey man, like I seriously have leads. Like I want to give you these leads, man. And so, he's like, okay, well, I'm flying to Dallas right now. Cause he was still on the board for, Home Investors at the time. And so he's like, hit me up next week. So then I followed up with them on Monday. I'm like, hey Pace, hope you had a good time in Dallas. Let's get together. I have leads.
he's like, what do you mean you're not a good salesperson? You just followed me 3 times. We haven't even met yet.
Yeah. So I'm just like, dude, like, come on. And so we ended up meeting at this like Mexican food restaurant, and we're just talking. And he's just like, all right, so you seriously have leads? I'm like, yes, like I'm telling you, I have leads. And he's like, okay, well, let's, he's like, get some of your leads together and then let's talk. And then so like we just kind of like chopped it up, got to know each other a little bit. And like 2 days later, he texted me. He's like, hey, my golf tournament just got canceled, and I was driving by the area that you live in. He's like, meet me at the McDonald's at Val Vista and Southern. And I'm like, or Greenfield and Southern. I'm like, perfect. And so I drive over to this McDonald's, and I already had my leads ready of like my hot ones that I wanted to share with them. And he's like, so who do you actually have leads that are like, good people to talk to? And I'm like, yes. And so I literally opened up my laptop at McDonald's, and he's just like gorging this freaking like Big Mac down. And he's like, all right, well, let's call them. And so like the first one we called was this lady, Desiree, that I'd been working on. And we end up, on that deal, we ended up getting it contracted the next week, had a bunch of liens and crap to deal with, like meth house, like needles, all sorts of stuff.
Wow.
But we end up doing that deal. And he's like, he was telling, because I told him, I was like, you can make all the money on it. And so we get the deal under contract at 100,000. And he's like, oh yeah, we'll probably sell this for like 130 or 120. And I'm like, perfect. And then he's like, he's like, you get it and you assign it to me and make 10 and I'll make 10. And I was like, I'm happy to do that, but I want to learn. So like, I don't want that to stop me from being able to continue doing deals with you. And he's like, no, he's like, dude, you need to make money on this. He's like, generate more leads. I'm like, okay. So we do that first deal. Desiree ends up turning into a private lender. We still have her in 3 deals with us right now to this day.
That's amazing.
And we helped her buy her own house to seller finance. So it's like great story with Desiree. But
Wow.
so that was that first deal that we ever, did together. And then the next week we got 3 more under contract, and then like another one like the following week. So then we went to like 4 or 5 deals a month together. Instead of my like 2 to 3 that would then generate like, 7 to 8,000, on a deal, sometimes a little more. So then, those ones ended up being bigger, typically like 12 or 15K deals, just with him being involved in the sales process. And so it was just really great because we were able to, do like he was doing what he liked to do and I was doing what I like to do. I'm like, all I have to do is generate leads and then just tee them up for you to go and close them. I'm like, easy, like all day, like done. And so for him, he's like, I don't have to generate any of the leads or do any of that. And I don't have to mess with any of the operations side. You just like, once I go sign a contract, I give it to you and then everything else just happens. I'm like, he's like, done. So it's like, it just kind of worked really well, starting off. And we did that for a couple months. And then I remember we were sitting at his kitchen table one evening and we were just talking about, just the deals that we're working on. And he was just like, I just remember he was just like looking to the side and he just looks at me and he's like, if in like 2 or 3 months, like this still is like working out, like, and and we don't hate each other and you don't think I'm a piece of crap and I don't think you're a piece of crap, maybe we should partner. And I was like, okay. So
that's amazing, dude. Like that whole story is so good because obviously people only see now, like especially now with you guys obviously being very much in the spotlight. They're like, well, how does that happen, right? And really, it happened because you were just like trying to provide value to Pace in a way like,
yeah.
I don't even want to get paid for this. Like I just want to learn. Again, you're back to curious because you want to know the business. You want to learn how the business goes.
Long game.
And long game, right? 100%. Like you're not worried about what's in it for me right now. You're like, I want to understand this process. And I don't know if the relationship was necessarily part of that piece. I'm sure it was because you saw guys doing 10 deals at once. So like at least in the back of you, I was like, well, at least this person, I wanted to be a resource. I wanted to sell my deals, but it ended up becoming somebody who now you are partnered with. right? And it
Yeah.
became a nice match because, again, you like doing one piece of the business and he liked doing another piece of the business. And the fact that you guys were both givers, so now your values also lined up. So your like what you guys like doing and your values lined up. All of a sudden, it became like, if I don't hate you, like let's do more business together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're okay right now. If you're still okay after 2 months, we can talk a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's so
So
much value in that though, Cody. It really is. It goes to show your like, because a lot of people don't get to see you because you're not out there, aside from being on Sunday service, which if you guys don't go watch that podcast like you should. But for the most part, like Pace is the one who's out in the spotlight, and Cody's back there running the business, and he's getting the team going, and he's basically making sure all the systems are together. But the reason that they work so well together is because not only do they, again, like one person's visionary, one person integrator, but their values are the same. Like Cody is a huge giver. Like you just heard it right there. And there's many examples where he gives more than he expects to receive at all. And I think that's ultimately what makes an amazing partnership. Is not just like you like Pace likes doing this thing, you like doing this thing, but also your values are like, how do I give? How do I serve? And also you're very curious and you're always willing to learn. And so instead of like when a mistake happens, like Pace makes a mistake or someone on your team makes a mistake, instead of getting angry at them, you're like, I wonder why they did that. I'm curious, right? You become like, and then
Yep.
that's the sort of thinking that leads to growth mindset rather than pointing fingers and blaming and all that type of stuff. So anyway, I just wanted to say, like, I thought that was really valuable. So thank you for sharing that.
100%. Yeah, no, it's interesting. And I think it's, like people just have to do some of that internal work and like understand like why they're doing something. Like I was getting involved in that business because I'm like, I'm going to get rich doing this and I'm going to get wealthy doing this. And like, this is going to be a long game. And something that I had a mentor tell me when I was 17 and I started in that network marketing company is he's like, Cody, if you're not going to commit yourself to this, whatever business or career that you're getting into for at least 5 years, don't even waste your effing time. And I'm like,
Yeah.
okay. So I was just like, okay, well, that's that. All right, I'm in. And so I spent 4 years in that company and then not out of my choice that, stopped being something I could do. So I'm like, okay. So when I got into real estate, as an agent, my goal was to invest. And so I'm like, well, I can commit 5 years in figuring this out because in the real estate business, like if you are making reasonable progress and measurable progress, each month, each year, you can make a ton of money in this industry. And so, especially if you commit 5 years, and I think it's just people are too short-sighted and they want to see like the get rich quick. They want to, make a quick rip. And it's like, dude, there's like, then what? Like you talk to people, they're like, oh my gosh, like I want to make like 100 grand on a deal. And I'm like, well, then what? Like I'm like 100 grand in revenue comes in. I'm like 15% is going to go aside to taxes. 35% of that's going to go between owner comp and profit compensation. The rest of that's going to go sit in the OpEx. Like, I'm like, I don't like money is not that anymore to me. And it's like money has a job to do. And that's, whether it's going to be deployed within something that we're investing in, or whether that's going to be deployed in, paying me personally that then I could spend freely on what I want to spend it on. Right. So it's like, people have to have that longer term mindset, because that's why there's so many people that are like poor, or like average, incomes, it's like, they're just so freaking short sighted. And I'm like, I'm definitely not the fastest, one. Like there's plenty of other people that, made money in the same things I've done way faster and way better and way more success faster. But I'm like the turtle. Like you're going to see me in 20 years still like plugging on something, like whatever business it is. It's like, I'm still going to be plugging, so it's like, I'm in it for the long run. Like I'm going to be here. So that's, I think that mindset is important to have, because people get too caught up in like what happened today or how bad last month was. Right. Like me and Pace had plenty of bad months too. It's not like it's just rainbows and unicorns. Like we had deals that went sideways in months where it's like, shit, we had one deal close this month because out of the 7 we got, 5 had title issues and one of them got pushed back to the next month. And it's like, that stuff happens, and that's just part of this business.
So I want to highlight 2 things, and this is really for the people who are watching and who will rewatch. And Logan, I don't know if you caught this, but Cody's take, and it's something he learned from his mentor, and it's something he still believes in today, and that's the 5-year rule. A few weeks ago, we had on Dan Young. Is one of the phenomenal speakers for Clever Summit. And he came on and he talked about when investing in an asset class, if you aren't ready to hold and be stable in whatever it is, whatever that asset is, whether it's real estate or it's, now like crypto is a thing, or if it's stocks, whatever it is, if you're not mentally prepared for holding for 5 years or lasting 5 years and not expecting like a big meaningful return in 5 years, don't do it. So for everyone who's watching, like we had Dan Young, multi-millionaire, give us that piece. And then we just had Cody pretty much echo the exact same thing, but from a business perspective, which is amazing. But I have to highlight this. This all goes back to what Logan was saying, and that's that you have an emphasis on giving without an expectation or an immediate expectation of receiving something back. And as a closer, especially in sub 2, people bring me leads all the time. And the second that I get it under contract, what's the first question they ask? It's all before we've even opened up escrow is, how much am I going to make? I'm like, I have no freaking clue yet. But we start seeing that's where the mindset immediately goes. And like, we don't even know if title is going to clear. We haven't even fielded buyers yet. Like, we need to figure some things out. Yeah. But your emphasis on giving, and even when it was a time to assign a deal and make 10K on it, you understood the long game. And the long game, for everyone watching, like, do not get short-sighted. $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 doesn't matter when you're learning, because that knowledge is going to make you millions and millions and millions in the long run. So, and honestly, what you prioritize is the most important thing, and that's the relationship.
Yeah. And here's what's funny. Here's what's funny too about those two things, Sam. So like, how likely are you to want to do a deal with the person who the first question they ask after you close the deal is, how much am I going to get paid? And
they're going to get exited from my CRM as soon as we're done with that deal.
And it's funny because Pace offered to pay Cody for the first deal. He's like, no, and like, I don't want to get paid. I want to make sure that I'm able to give you more deals, right? Mm-hmm. And so he set that upfront contract, and then Pace was like, no, bro, like, I want you to get paid. And so like, how likely is Pace to want to bring or do another deal with Cody because even he just had that conversation? Like, he actually got paid still, but the way that it was portrayed was like, oh, like, I don't want to get paid because I want to make sure I do a deal with you. He basically showed his priority, and then Pace was like, no. And then it's like, then he got the best of both worlds. He got both things.
Yeah.
How amazing is that?
Yeah. And we all know, I think all three of us.
Cody's a freaking salesperson. He just did a takeaway on Pace. Like, he just like sold
This is
Pace.
so true, guys.
Pace thinks he's the sales guy. Cody's the freaking sales guy.
No. Cody, actually, on Sunday service, when I first joined, Cody was the one. I didn't know anything about like subs. I didn't really know much yet. And then they were talking, and then Cody said something to the effect of, I think we're capped at California, right? There's no more California students allowed like that. That market's shut off for sub 2. And like, immediately I dialed the recruiter. I was like, is California capped? No, I don't care. Get me on I need to get in now. So, but guys, all that to say, like, all three of us, right? Cody, probably more than anyone here, Pace's emotional intelligence, his ability to read people. And we had Laura on last week, and we found out that Pace has been that way for a long time. That's not something that he just developed now. He's always viewed people. He's always reading people. And when you go, for everyone who's new, because I had to be in this position too when I was new, and all I knew how to do was pull a lead and bring a lead to the table. When you go to an advanced closer, someone especially as gifted as Pace Morby, man, they're going to read every single thing you do, every single action, everything you say. And the fact that you led with what you led, really, I can guarantee he had, especially after being on a podcast, he had tons of people coming to him. You're probably the only person who approached him in that way. And look at you guys now. It's amazing.
And it's interesting because, like, obviously all of that came together, and it's like, I think if more people just like cared more about like having good intentions and like a good long-term vision for like what they want to accomplish with what they're doing, like they would make better decisions like that. Yeah. And so it's like, it's like, yes, like that is how I think, but I think more people would think that way if they thought more long-term and not being as short-sighted of like, what am I getting right now? What am I getting today? So I think people just have to like change their time horizon of things. And those are often a lot of conversations that I'll have with like newer people. They're like, well, how fast can I get this? And I'm like, well, like it's gonna maybe take you a while. I don't know. Like I met this guy and he made $100,000 the first month because he got some weird deal that worked. And then this person, they worked their guts out for 6 months and they made $4,000 in 6 months and they spent $20,000 in marketing. Like, I don't know, which one are you? It's like, I don't know, everyone's going to come from a different place, but from that to today where Pace obviously has, his sub 2 program that's, really successful. And, we've now built, multiple companies where like, the fix and flip business is, steadily done 7 figures a year. We'll see what we're going to do this year with, just because I don't know if we're going to continue ramping on as many fix and flips because of the shifting in the economy. Little conservative. So I don't know how I'm going to see on that, but where that business has been able to do that. And, Pace has a lot more properties than I do, but, with us together, we got 36 of them together and, a pretty solid portfolio in the time we've been together. And, so it's like in a short period of time, it's like we haven't even had 5 years yet, but it's like 7-figure flipping business, a good chunk of rentals. That's, multi-millions of net worth for both of us. And, StartVirtual is going to be our first, 8-figure a year company together this year. And, so it's like we got some really cool stuff going in a short period of time. And so I think it's just people have to plan for 5 years, but work like it has to be done this year. And they'll be shocked on what they can actually accomplish. I think there's like the quote or something by Steve Jobs, or I don't know, one of them. It's like, people underestimate, what they can accomplish in 10 years and overestimate what they can accomplish in a year. It's like, there's so much foundation that has to be done in the first year for people, especially if they don't have a business background or a real estate background, that it's like you can make reasonable progress in a year, but it's like, guys, like, gotta give it some time. Like, you gotta, everyone wants the microwave solution. We're in a crock pot business, guys. Like, we're a get rich slow over here. Real estate's a get rich for sure, but it's not a get rich quick.
I think there's a couple of things that you said right there that are really important. And if I were to summarize it, I would just say if people need to check their priorities, right?
Yeah.
And so people often prioritize money as an outcome, but as we just talked about earlier in your story, Cody, like money, it comes, but it can also go away really quickly, whether it's in your power or your influence or not. And so what's really important, which again, you've said multiple times, is that what you valued more than anything was actually the knowledge, was actually the learning, the experience, because as you've just have proven, and we can look at many other people's stories too who have lost it all and built it back. Like the reason why they were able to build it back is because they understood the process. They understood that it takes time, and they prioritized the journey and the experience and the knowledge and the processes more than they did the actual outcome of a dollar. Right?
100%. Because
So
what you have up here can't be taken away. It's like once you know it, you can't unknow it.
It's one of the most powerful. It is the most powerful resource, I believe, is this up here, because of what you just said right there. I think the second thing, which is another thing that you've shown a ton of priority in, is relationships, right? So you prioritize a relationship over a dollar too. So you're willing to say, hey, like, I want this relationship. I don't want money. Please don't give me money. I value you, and you've shown that. And again, if people prioritize the relationship over money, then they would be a lot further along as well. Because again, it's just playing the long game rather than like, I need to make $1 today.
Mm-hmm.
I need to feed my family today, right?
Yep.
And so I think if people just understood that priority system, it's like knowledge, relationship, and then I mean, there's a lot of other things, but if we just put money in that equation as third, people just like use that as a template. It would lend itself to them playing the long game more rather than what can I get from you now.
Yep. 100%. And that's where everything, all the real true and, success and happiness is going to come from, is the long game. Like no one really, like, even if people get like lucky and they make a bunch of money, like there are some fix and flippers that got like lucky, in my opinion, hard work, but there's some luck in like, making a bunch of money, maybe the last like year and a half, where like inflation's been going rampant. Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like, people think that they're very smart, but like no one was really that smart the last year and a half. If you bought real estate and then you sold it, and a few months after you bought it, like you made money. So it's like, there's people that they're getting too caught up in like the short term of like what they're doing versus like the long term of like, why is this working? Why is it, how could it be better? And how could I be better? And how can, our team be better? And it's like looking at the inputs of what's happening versus just what the output is, because that same person, when the market's going down and they're not doing that, they're going to, have mental challenges with like, why is this not working for me now? And it's like, well, you were thinking about it the wrong way.
Yeah. You know what's really cool is that people are going to look at you, Cody, and they're like, dude's a multimillionaire at 28 years old, and they're like, he's so young. However, you're like your age for 28 years old, you know, in comparison to most people who start in business, let's say 30s or 40s, is young, but your business age, you started when you're 18, like you're like you've been in business for a decade.
Yeah.
You've had success, you lost it, you built yourself up in a couple different areas. And so if people are listening, they're like, how does he do it at 28 years old? And they start to compare themselves to you. A lot of times it's 30, 40-year-old people who are like been W-2 employees for a period of time. They go start the entrepreneur journey at, you know, and we'll say in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they try to compare themselves to you. But what they're missing out is that they're like, you guys are not the same age. You're older than them, Cody, by a decade. You have a decade worth of scars. You have a decade worth of wisdom that you have right here. And so anyone who's listening, just understand that like Cody's 28 years old, which is young compared to me, but Sam's 26. So you're right. It's like, it just depends on who you're looking at. However, he's been in business for a decade, and there's something that you can never replace that experience, that wisdom.
Yeah.
Outside of just being in the game.
I had a mentor tell me this when I was 18 or 19. And because I would get frustrated sometimes over like not being able to be further along. Like there's one guy that was 25 making like 60 grand a month in that company. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like that's so much money, you know, at that, you know, I was 18. And so, and I would like, because I had a couple mentors I would go to frequently. And this guy named Tom, he's like, Cody, he's like, one of the life lessons that you have to learn is not to compare, you know, your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 10 or chapter 7. You know, it's like you're in your first chapter. Like you can't, like, you comparing isn't fair to you or fair to the judgment you're imposing upon somebody else based on where you're at. So, you know, I really just, you know, I know some people have challenges around like comparing themselves to other people more frequently. And like, I used to when I was in my earlier 20s and like my late teens, but that's kind of faded away the more I'm like, you know, I can't really compare where I'm at versus where they're at based on like their experiences. And, you know, it's just all you can do is like close the gap on your chapters. And it's just, you know, if you can get insight from them, maybe if they're at chapter 10, it's like maybe your chapter 7 could be where they are at chapter 10 because you got insight from them. And that's why, you know, things like masterminds and, you know, coaching and, you know, mentors are important because you can shorten your, you know, your book and get there faster from those experiences and those people.
So I love that you said that because Logan today, I think it was today on Instagram, posted about not letting fear and anxiety take up your mental real estate, right? The bandwidth that you have between your ears, the mental real estate that you have, it's finite. It's not infinite at any given time because we only have so much time in the day. It's up to us to decide what we occupy that mental real estate with. And when we start getting into things that lead to judgment or to envy, to basically jealousy, because we're looking at someone who may be younger than us. I'm around a lot of guys who are 22, 23, who are already millionaires. And it's very easy to fall into that trap. And the longer that I spend, you know, if I spend my mental real estate focusing on them and why I'm not where they're at, what I'm doing is I'm actually neglecting the fact that they got started at 18. They got started at 17. Maybe their dad was an investor. Maybe they've been prepping for this their whole lives. And I just got started last year. The reality is if we choose to take that mental real estate, instead of giving it to that specific thought process and allocate it to a different one, and that thought process is just building our own businesses, it's insane what can happen. And a lot of people, one thing that I love about Cody, just with your way of speaking about, you know, about building this business up, and I know that you're an integrator, and this is kind of how, you know, you may be wired this way compared to a lot of different people. And as a visionary, I sometimes have to struggle with this. And it took me a while to figure out the sooner that we can start viewing everything as just a set of processes, it takes the guesswork out. It takes the intangibility of, oh, maybe that person's a better closer than I am. Maybe that person's more talented. Maybe they're more blessed. And then as soon as we can actually just put it onto a blueprint and take the guesswork out of it, it just makes it that much easier and predictable to go and make it happen. So if we do lose it, if the companies fail or the deals fall apart, it's not that it's not that much of a problem because we just go and replicate it over and over again. And I see, there's a trap with a lot of visionaries right now because it's kind of glorified, I feel like, to be a visionary right now. There's just a lot of like, showmanship to it, and people they fall for it.
Visionary, sales, it's sexy, it's
Closer,
cool.
and it's like
Closer.
I co-hosted the Nightly Dial, so I'm like, I feel like I'm partially to blame for that because we made being a closer, we tried. Logan is a master salesman too, so he gets this. And stepping away from that to build my business, and taking off the closer hat and really discovering that I need to build out robust systems. Now I'm seeing growth. Now I understand why I'm succeeding, and why certain things aren't succeeding. And it's like, I wish I had that clarity so much sooner. So for everyone who's watching, who's a young visionary, you think of yourself as a salesman first and foremost, the sooner that you guys can, because I'm developing it now, the sooner that you can get to that way of thinking, the way that Cody approaches stuff, I promise you it's going to become so much easier.
100%. And it's just, that, and the sad thing is on that too, is like, I went through my entire early 20s thinking that like I was just less than because I didn't naturally like sales. I would do it because I'm a grinder and that's what I do, is like, I'll make it happen regardless. Right. But I thought, I'm like, man, like, is there something wrong with me? Because I don't really love sales. Like, I love business. I love finance. I love operations. Like, I love those things. And I didn't even know I loved operations at that time. I just loved like the operational tendency things, and I just didn't know it. And I went through my whole early 20s, like 21 to 24, really, until I read Rocket Fuel, thinking that that was like a negative thing. And really, like, after, embracing it, it's like, okay, there's a bunch of people that can, fulfill that area of sales and like some of those visionary tendencies, that I don't have to do those things, and, just stepping more into my zone of genius. And so I think, some people still do this, that think they need to be like this visionary salesperson. Like, I'm a visionary too, in ways like with StartVirtual, like I'm basically running that company. Like, that's like, I help us establish where we're going and the things we're doing and new product offerings, with other team members. I say I'm running it, but it's our team that's really doing a lot of the things and making things happen, right? But it's you can have the tendencies of both, but it's like knowing thyself and stepping into where you're more in your zone of genius, because you're going to do your best work there. And for people that are listening, it's like, go, like, step into more of where you are. Like, people say like you have to work on what you're bad at. Like, yes, if like you are in real estate, you're bad at comping, yes, learn to comp. Like, you need to understand how to value a property. But if you're not great at sales and you're a freaking stud at operations, like, step into that and work with someone or hire someone to do the sales. Like, those are the things that people have to understand. Like, step into what you're great at and focus on that, and then you could delegate and outsource the rest to other people.
So much good stuff you said in there. And when you're an entrepreneur, like, you listen to Cody's story, like, he started out as doing sales. He started out freaking knocking on doors and doing cold calls, things like that.
Yeah.
He wouldn't do it today.
No.
But in his business, he started out by doing, because that's what he had to do. He had to do what it takes. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs, when they first get started, they want to skip
steps.
They want to skip the step. They want to skip doing sales. They want to skip being an integrator. They want to skip doing the processes. They're like, oh, I'm just a salesperson. They don't want to do anything else. And every situation is different. However, I think, Cody, you said it, and maybe you can either take your own spin on it, or you can even challenge me on it. But I think everyone, when you're a young entrepreneur, like, you should have phases. You should have seasons where you actually do all the pieces of the business, right? And I don't mean that in a like you have to actually do every single piece, but like you must oversee and at least be in charge of the big pieces of the business, for you to really understand like what your genius is. Because unless you've done sales, you're like, man, like I can do it, I understand it, but it doesn't feel good, right? And I've been feeling this way for years. I'm like, and then all of a sudden you step into a role where you're managing people or you're managing team. You're like, oh man, gosh, I love building culture. Like, this is me. I feel this. Like, I can sell someone on the value of the organization, what we're doing, and our mission. But like, me selling a new person coming into the organization, or a seller, like, it doesn't feel good. So until you're able to actually experience that, I don't think you really know. And so that's why I challenge my belief is to challenge young entrepreneurs out there who again, who are in their first chapter, to really experience all pieces of the business, so you actually know for
Yeah.
sure what your genius is.
I love that. I think it's crucial because then it's like you don't really know until like you start doing the things and then you start finding the things that you more tend to do. Like there's beauty in procrastination, meaning like the things you procrastinate on are typically the things you don't like to do. And so that's where you can start to identify where those some changes need to happen. And so and someone told me this back when I was in network marketing as well. This they're like someone could be so great at something, but because they've never done the thing, they never get to realize like their greatness. And it's like, imagine if like Ronaldo or like Messi, like never got to kick a soccer ball. Like, what if it was like their parents were just like, oh no, you're playing baseball or you're, and it's like they found that and it's like they stepped into their genius being in that thing, right? And it's like that's kind of like the game of business in ways. Like you have to do some of the things, and like you said, especially that first chapter, because it's like you're so green when you're first starting a business. Like it's fun when I get to have chances to talk to people that are like just starting any business and it's like their first adventure, and I'm just like in my head I'm like, I'm so happy for you, but it's gonna suck.
It's gonna suck. I have to, I'm so glad that you said that. It's that, sometimes if you look at Ronaldo, or you look at Messi, or you look at all these people, right? The greats of all sports, Tiger Woods, we look at Kobe, LeBron,
Nadal, Mr. Tennis
Nadal,
Guy,
Federer.
Mr. Tennis Guy. Say your tennis guys, come on.
Well, yes, Federer first.
You
But you look at all these people, and I actually was having this conversation with a previous guest that we had, JJ, and I told him that I've fallen in love with public speaking. I fell in love with public speaking in college, where I had to get on stages with a microphone and speak to crowds. And the reality is 99% of people who may actually have an amazing knack for it, an amazing innate talent for public speaking, connecting with people, they may never be able to realize it because it's so easy to shy away from public speaking. It's so easy to never want to step up and be on that stage. And then what'll happen is that because they never take the opportunity, they never take the chance, they never give that talent breathing room to come to the surface to discover that they actually love it. And so I'm so glad that you said that. And it's so true. I mean, I could only imagine if we look at guys like Federer, we look at, Michael Jordan, we look at any of these guys and just imagine, because we hear about a lot of them and a lot of them started off as multi-sport athletes in the beginning when they were kids, and they had to make a pivotal choice at a critical moment, usually when they're like 5 to 8 years old, very young, and they pick one way or the other. And it's amazing to think about what could have happened if they didn't. So for everyone watching, there's a lot of stuff that makes us uncomfortable. And there's a lot of value to what Logan's saying. I'm setting up Airbnbs everywhere. And it's like, I don't want to go and have a screwdriver and like put stuff together. But there's a value in me, at least in the first few stages of doing it, to go figure out what that process looks like, to get some baselines on how long that's going to take, to figure out how I can, one, I'll realize that I hate it, which I do. And then two, I'll realize how I can outsource it, how I can automate it, how I can scale it without my involvement. And there's so much value to doing that type of stuff.
Yeah. Cody, so as we kind of transition here and we start to wrap things up, I talked a little bit about in the beginning that you can wheel, right? We had the pleasure of being part of the mastermind, and you and Pace put together an amazing mastermind. So if you're part of Sub2 and you have the opportunity to go to a mastermind, obviously all of the information, the community, the ability to actually connect with Cody and Matt and Pace is like, it is intangible, right? People always ask me like, what value do you get from the mastermind? And it's like those relationships, right? Because that's what I prioritize. I prioritize relationships. The knowledge there is great, but it's the relationships and being able to like to touch you, right, and to be in your presence and to feel your energy and see mannerisms. Like there's certain things that you only pick up when you're in person with somebody. But one of the events that we did was we went go-kart racing. Right. And it's funny because I love go-kart racing as well. Every single time I go to any town, I'm always like, where's the go-kart track? And so you also have a beautiful, I don't know, actually, I think I saw that you were selling your Porsche, maybe you were buying another Porsche. So kind of tell us a little bit about your about your car and your racing hobbies that you have going on here.
I quickly have to say that this has been like teased a bit, that Cody has cracked the code to basically get supercars and rotate them out, and he felt like, I feel like when it comes to swapping out cars, like Cody is like Neo and he can see the Matrix,
Oh my
and he knows
gosh.
when to get them. We're just like, oh, love to hear about it.
Yeah, so well, I mean the go-kart racing thing, like my dad used to race like quarter midgets, and like he was like
Awesome.
eventually probably gonna like could have went to like professional stages, but you know that my dad's side of the family didn't have enough money. You need money to do that type of sport, and that's just, you know, that's not a thing. So my dad's an amazing racer, and so he taught me growing up and would just like beat the crap out of me on courses and different stuff. And so like I learned a lot of things from him on like how to race. And so I love it. And honestly, like that's like one of my favorite things to do too. But with cars, so I still have the 911 Turbo S right now. And what I found is like I've outsourced this, Sam. So I do have a good basis on understanding on like the value of the cars, but there's a company called Exotic Car Hacks. There's a guy named PJ, and then he has another guy, Hunter, that they source the cars for you, and they have like a whole program on teaching you how to hack cars. Essentially, it's only exotic cars that this works for. But getting into cars with the right options, the right mileage, and the right, you know, timing in the market, and holding them for a certain period of time, typically, you know, 3,000 or 4,000 miles on them. And then you're you're selling it, you're moving into something different. And so that's really the model. There's obviously a lot of detail in it, but they have a car finder program that I went through for this particular car, and I'll continue to go through for every car I buy going forward when it comes to exotic cars, because they make it easy. I want to spend my time on business because that's what I enjoy doing. And I don't necessarily enjoy, like, for me to spend like 20 hours car shopping, like browsing, you know, forums online and negotiating with sellers, that's a waste of my time. And I could pay these guys, you know, a $1,900 car finder fee, which is, you know, very, very cheap. And in reference to the time I save, they'll help me find the car, make sure the inspections are done properly, and review the inspection report if there's anything on there they think is going to be an issue. If it passes that, then, you know, I get my own financing in place, you know, get the car purchased wherever it's at. They'll help me line up transportation of the car through a trusted vendor of theirs and get the car to me. So it's like they just make it very easy for me, and it's not. I value my time a lot with that, so that's where it's worked. The only thing that I have a complaint of is I wish they had a car selling service, because I'm very lazy at selling the car because I don't want to spend the time on it. And it's like people reach out to me and they're like, "Can I come test drive it?" And I'm like, "Send me proof of funds." Like, I don't want to talk to you unless you send me proof of funds or like your, you know, pre-qual, because it's like it's just such a waste of time because it's like you think about like you only have so many hours in a day, and it's like I, you know, value my hours at, you know, a high dollar amount. If that could be dedicated towards work, like I could get a lot more bang for my buck, right? So so that's been one of the things. But the nice thing is on that car, I'm not going to talk about the numbers on it yet, because I haven't sold it, and I don't want someone to see this video and then like use it against me to negotiate.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
But you know, I got into it at, you know, a good price. Like it was in great condition, and I should make, you know, a little bit of money or be very close to a break even on it when I sell it. And so like that's really the model. And you can go through their program, and they have like an education course and all this stuff that I bought, and then like I went through like a couple hours of it, and I'm like, and then I heard they had a car finder thing, and I'm like, I am not going to spend any of my time like going through like every single thing, like what carbon package specific does this year have, and what year does this one hit its depreciation line curve. And it's like, I'm just going to have the experts do it for $1,900, and like we'll call it a day.
That's amazing.
So I just found that program, and it's been awesome. And the guys there, PJ is a little intense and abrasive, but he's hilarious too. You know, weak personalities would probably be offended by him, just, you know, putting that out there. But Hunter, the guy that helps you actually source them, guy's top notch, awesome guy, and, you know, super, super helpful, and made it super easy. Like I literally bought that Porsche when I was like traveling, you know, from I went on a trip last summer, and like while I was like traveling and doing stuff, like he lined everything up all the way from like the, you know, paperwork to sale, like shipped off things to me to sign in a different state and then a different state, like just all the things, and then like got it shipped home to me while I was, you know, gone. And so it's like this made everything really easy. But yeah, cars are definitely a love of mine.
That's amazing. That's why I jive with you so much. Like very similar background. I grew up in a racing family. My family still races today. Like I have a younger cousin who's 21, 22, races dirt track, and my dad raced. My uncle raced for 20 years. My grandpa raced, and I grew up around it as well. And it's always been something that's like always been a yeah,
cool. It's like I wish we could do it.
Yeah. Right? And so that's awesome, man. I love hearing the story about how, you know, like that your dad was, you know, an amazing driver. And anyone who's ever done any sort of racing, like it's freaking expensive and it's a hobby, and you don't get paid. Although you get, say, you have sponsors, like it usually doesn't cover barely any of the cost, especially as someone who's an amateur racer, which almost all drivers are amateurs, is that it's just basically enough to maybe get some tires, maybe get some gas, but like it's so expensive. There's so much cost that goes into it. And all it is like for pride. It's just for ego.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So Cody, as we kind of wrap up here, what are, as like when you're talking to new entrepreneurs, you're just talking to someone in general, like what are questions that, like what's a question you want someone to ask you that people rarely ever ask you?
It's a good question. I think more questions are like around like, you know, so one of the questions that I always ask, like I'm in a mastermind called COO Alliance, and the guy that runs it, Cameron Harold, he's built 3 different companies from like nothing to over $100 million. And so one of the questions I asked him is I was like, what question haven't you been asked from someone this weekend that you think that people, you know, like myself should be asking you? So like those are like the types of questions I always ask, are these really weird off ones too. So threw me off a little bit on that. But I think questions like that for sure, because I think what it does is it draws out an answer that's going to give you some insight on something you didn't even think you wanted to know.
Yeah.
And so that's like, so one of the questions that I asked this Cameron guy, and then I will answer your question, but one of the questions that I answered or asked this Cameron guy is when I said that, or a follow-up to him, is I was like, hey, like, so our company, you know, we'll probably do like StartVirtual, we'll probably do like 11, 12 million this year. I'm like, what do you see companies in that revenue range doing wrong that if they if they could only change one thing, would change their results drastically? And so he's like, people, he's like, you're, you know, the people that got you from where you are to that level that you're at now may not be the people that get you from, you know, 11 to 20 million or 30 million a year. He's like, the 2 things have to happen in any organization is typically, you know, you are going to have to hire people from outside that have done this at a higher level, or you have to teach your people and be investing more in your people that you have working at your company now. And so it really kind of, you know, adjusted my insight a little bit on like, all right, we just need to hire and grow, and it's like grow revenue. But now I'm like, now that focus is kind of shifted more to like, how do I grow the people, and like creating a budget around, you know, how much a year am I investing in every manager that we have at our company and all of our companies, you know, what's our budget for that, and how are we going to allocate that, and how is that going to make a difference in them becoming better? And so that's something that I like coaching people in our companies. I'm like, look, we're going to continue to grow. We're going to double. We're going to triple, like whether it's in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, like however long, you know, next year, it's like however long it takes, like this is where we're going. And for you to be able to be in the position you're in now and a year from now at this revenue range, you have to grow. And so like, I kind of just warn like our team, it's like, look, like, and that includes me too. I have to grow, because if I don't grow, I can't be the type of person that's going to be able to lead this type of a company at this revenue range, because I am not the type of person yet. And so, those are, you know, that was like kind of a, I know, a tangent, but that was something that was asked in a similar question. So the type of questions that I would say are just like not asking the like, what would you do to get your first deal if you were me? It's like, it's like you could find like 100 answers of that on YouTube, so I would, just, I guess, more insightful ones like, hey, like, what, like, sharing like what they're trying to accomplish is helpful. It's like, because when people ask very generic questions, I'm like, I don't know. What do you want? Like, what, like, I don't know what lifestyle you want. Like, I don't know. Do you have 7 kids? Like, are you married? I don't know what to tell you based on, there's very little information. So I would say, asking questions in a way of like, hey, like that question to Cameron, it's like I was looking for a specific answer. And so just being more intentional on a question where if I'm trying to say, figure out like I want to do a certain amount of revenue. So I would format the question more of like, hey, this is where I'm at. I'm doing 2 deals a month. This is how much money I'm spending. This is how much time I have. I have a W-2 job. I have 2 kids. I have to allocate, a certain amount of time for that. That, like, giving more context of like, here's where I'm at. And then it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? Or like, what's the thing that you're trying to do? So then I could give a better answer. Cause I think it's that people are asking, they're not formatting and like setting up their question properly to get a proper response from me. And that's where sometimes I feel bad, because I'm like, people ask me these questions and I'm like, I could have just given this person terrible advice because I don't know that they have 7 kids at home and they're working 3 jobs right now, and it's that advice isn't for them. So I think coming with some context behind a question is definitely helpful. And then I would say questions around finance and money management, because I think too much, and especially in the real estate industry and entrepreneur just space, is people talk about how much money that their company's making, or how much, volume, or I, did this much in revenue. But it's like, well, how much are you keeping? What's your money management system like for your company? How do you, manage your OpEx versus your profit? How do you manage your tax pay? How are you managing your reserve capital? How are you reinvesting your money? How are you, distributing that into other ventures that you're starting? And then to personal level, now money comes to you personally from your company. How are you managing that? Do you, like, for me, it's like I have, a financial freedom account that money is set aside for investing. I have a long-term savings account that's set aside for me to buy whatever I want, whether it's stupid or not. That's just what that money's for. I have an account for giving, for me to give. That I can give to friends, I could give to family, I can give, I have a fun account. So it's like, it's money to be spent to splurge. Like, I just want to buy something stupid. That's what I'm going to do with it. Or if I want to do an experience, right? So it's like having, more questions around that, because, the person making, say if somebody goes from making 50 grand a year to now they have a successful real estate business and now they're making 250 grand a year, but they're mismanaging their money that's coming to them, that they only really have 50 grand left over at the end of the year because they mismanaged a lot of it. It's like, what are we really accomplishing? Unless your goal is just to spend everything that you make. And that's cool too. I see guys in our space that do that. And I'm like, it's all fun and games right now, but when the economy really shifts and it's like your model doesn't work, like, good luck, have fun.
Been there,
So
done
I
that.
like you kind of paint it almost, it's like a formula. God, I hate math. But it's a little bit like a formula, right? And it's like when people present, they want an answer, and it's like, help me by filling in some of those variables for me. The more that you have, the more that's filled in, the more intentional that you're asked, the more you're asking that question with more intentionality. And then it's going to allow, Cody or Logan or Pace to be able to give you a much more intentional answer that will actually give value back. I love that. I actually really, really love that.
Definitely. And then the money one too. It's like finance, like management, managing your money. Like, it's so boring. People hate it. Like, Pace, like, it took Pace like 6 months to, for us to stop butting heads when I first implemented Profit First. He was just like, why is that money sitting there? Why can't I take it? I'm like, it has a purpose.
It's funny, Sam, because what you guys just said right there is like, it's actually having enough self-awareness and enough actually like critical thinking where you're looking at your situation to be able to ask the question of like, here's where I'm at. That actually takes some time and energy to dive into, like, here's where I'm at. And then so by you understanding where you're at, having awareness, then you can articulate to Cody, here's what I'm at. What should I be doing? Where most people, they don't want to even look at where they're doing. They just want to like do one of these, like, just tell me, hey, please tell me what I should be doing. And like, you haven't even like looked to see what you're doing. first.
Yeah, it's like give me the magic bullet, and like I don't know.
And
I,
I see that
God.
happen a lot with like money, and you just talk about money too. I think the reason why people don't manage their money well is because they don't want to look at their finances. They don't look at their expenses. They don't look at the money coming in and out because they have financial cancer and they don't want to look at it like this. And I've seen a lot of that. I come from the fitness world. It's the same thing with food and exercise. Like people don't want to look at what they're eating. They don't want to understand, because once they understand that they're eating like an asshole, they're like, oh, no reason. No, I guess I know why I'm fat now. It's like, yes, now because you've been doing one of these, you've been banging your head like an ostrich. And I think people do that with finances. They do with everything. They do with the relationship. They just want to turn their head where they actually like take a breath, take some time, and go in there and say, you know what? I'm not obviously happy where I'm at, so that's why I'm going to inspect. I'm going to inspect my finance. I'm going to inspect my business. I'm going to inspect my relationship. I'm going to inspect my food, my fitness, all this stuff. And then you're able to have some awareness. Then you can articulate your question to a mentor, to a coach, rather than just like Cody said earlier, like just go throw money at it instead of actually learning why you're fat, why you're broke, why you're not good at making money, whatever it may be, right?
I actually have this rule, and as we wrap it up, I actually wanted to say this. This is because I'm a guy who I find myself blessed to be in certain circles where I can go and ask certain people questions, and these are like people who are doing very, very, very well, and they're mentors to me. They're people I look up to, and I actually have this rule with myself: is no matter what, I refuse to ask a question that I can easily get the answer to somewhere else. If I'm going to come to this authority figure, a mentor, someone who's killing it, crushing it, doing whatever they're doing, the reality is I'm going to them because I respect their authority, their place, their success. I have to actually ask myself, is this question that I'm going to ask, are they one of the only people in the world who can actually answer this? If the answer is no and a million other people can, go ask it to somebody else, because you're actually going to ruin that interaction, because those people a lot of times, like the Cody Bartons of the world, like the Paces, they get that same question 25 times a day, and it's a horrible way to set yourself apart.
I agree. And I think too, it's just like, being resourceful and going and looking for, some of those answers. There is an exercise that I had a mentor take me through years ago. It was kind of like almost like a meditation where you would kind of pick out like who some of your like business like idols are, so like on that I was like Tony Robbins, Grant Cardone, and like writing out, and then like writing down like 2 to 3 challenges that you're having right now in your business. And then like one of the things that he had us do in this exercise is he's like, okay, now pretend like he's like took me to, he's like, pretend you're, closing your eyes, you're at a round table and you're sitting there with Grant Cardone and you're asking Grant Cardone directly, like ask him that question to the challenge that you're having. Grant, how would you solve this? And then literally like creating a new like perspective paradigm for yourself of like answering the question from what you think that mentor would answer it, how you think they would answer that to yourself. And sometimes like I'll do think times on things that I'm stuck on, and I'll just be like, how would like Tony Robbins think about this, or how would Alex Hormozy think about this, or how would so and so think about this, or what would they say is the answer? And like sometimes like I could find my own answers from just asking myself questions from like a different perspective in my own head. And it's like people just need to think more too, honestly.
So
just think better.
It's so funny you said that, because that same concept I actually got from Alex. I was actually mentored with Alex for a period of time, and one of the things, yeah,
that's awesome.
I come from the fitness industry. I was like literally one of the very first gym lords.
He's being a little bit humble. Him and Alex are like, they're boys.
So one of the pieces of advice that Alex gave me though was that very same concept, except for he would say, I look at myself at 85 years old and I ask myself that question, like, what would Alex do? Right. And my wiser self, it maybe not so much of a business context and more maybe of a life context. And I've used that. And I've also used Alex in situation. I've used Tony Robbins. I've used people at Grant, probably very, very similar mentors, and like ask myself that question. And whether it's me at 85, whether it's them, I think it's like you said it really, really well. It's just actually taking some time to actually ask the question.
Definitely.
Just ask. Right.
Love it.
It's crazy. So as we kind of wrap up here, I'm actually really curious on your goals, like what you guys are like, what you personally are like, what you're moving towards. And I'm gonna ask a question before that of like, what mentorships are you part of right now in order for you to reach that goal? Like, who are the people you're reaching out to? Who are you utilizing in order for you to get to the whatever that goal is?
Yeah. So I've been in so many different masterminds and coaching programs and all sorts of things. And so um, I've narrowed it down to now where I'm only in one that I'm really dedicated to, which is the COO Alliance, which is essentially that Cameron Harold guy that, he's written a few really great books and, he's built a few companies to 100+ million. And so I'm like, that's a group that I want to be in. And so essentially in that group, you have to have, the company that you're representing has to be doing at least 4 million a year in revenue or more, to even get into the group. And then there's a couple hundred people in it. And so like, I'm like rubbing shoulders. Like I was at the in-person event and it's like, he had us line up in like terms of like your revenue, that your company did last year. And it's like out of like, at that in-person event, there's only about 40 people. Like I was like number 4 towards like the lowest revenue. And it was like the, highest there was like, 187 million last year in revenue company.
Wow.
And I'm like, man, like this is definitely the right room for me. Cause I'm like at the bottom of the totem pole over here. So that's a group that I'm really excited about. And, as far as actual specific coaching, I'm going to approach Cameron to do one-on-one coaching this fall. He's traveling on his honeymoon for the next 3 months. So there's not really an opportunity for that until then. So that's who I'm going to be going after. Like I've been in a lot of different real estate masterminds and really at the stage that Pace and I are at, like I don't really need to be in any more real estate related masterminds. Like I understand real estate, so I don't pretend that I know everything, but the things that I need to be better at are around people management, systems, operations, recruiting, hiring, building layers of leadership, automating things, delegating, situational leadership, process and project management, so it's like those are the skills that I need to grow to a higher level. Like I don't need to know another way of like, here's how to, do note investing. Like I don't really care to know more. Like for what I want, and and obviously me and Pace have some goals together, but for what I want, I'm like, if we could just continue acquiring, rentals and Airbnbs every single year, I'm pretty happy with that. And then doing the fix and flips that we're doing, and then focusing on, then doing eventually, hard money is something that we'd want to do like with our own money. So, probably next year we'll start something where we'll start lending with our own money. So with like just a percentage of like our net worth, like put that into a fund to be able to start lending out. And then some bigger projects, like, you guys probably saw the sub fund on that 400 unit apartment complex in North Carolina.
Yeah.
So, going in some more deals like that, I don't think we'll build our own fund where like we build a whole team out. As of right now, that's not really a desire of ours, but utilizing connections that we do have in vetting competent operators and finding, competent operators that have really good deals to then bring, funds to and be a part of those deals. So definitely doing more of that. But as far as like our actual real estate business, it's like I want to be at 100, 100 between rentals and Airbnbs, that me and Pace own together by 30. So, 2 years, we're at 36 now. So we still have to be, acquiring, which we are. And maybe that changes. Like I'm not married to the goal. I'm more married to like, my life's vision. And like, if I'm at 80 at 30 because the market really shifts and it just doesn't make sense, like I'm not going to like lose my mind over it. But it's like, going towards that direction. And then outside, my computer is about to die, so I needed to.
Let's say we lost you.
Yeah, I need to plug in here. Sorry, the audio is going to suck for a sec. But outside of that, that's that's kind of what on the real estate side, where I'm kind of looking to go. And then on the sorry guys, I'm like running around on here.
It's okay. You're making up for me, like, just disappearing 10 times.
Sam's so rude. He just says bye.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm out. I'm not interested.
Yeah, I always come back though.
What about personal goals? I know that you and Hayo have been together for a period of time. Like, do you see yourself eventually getting married, having kids? Like, what is your and I don't know if that's overstepping, but I don't care. I'm actually just curious.
Yeah, no, for sure. So that's definitely something that, here, let me get my mic back on. All right. Sound good again?
Yep.
Um, yeah, so definitely personally, yes, I do want to get married. That's something that we definitely have talked about. Like, kids are like kind of like early 30s for sure for me. So that's definitely on the horizon. And I want to be so financially set, like pretty financially set right now, but like I just want to be at such like stupid money that like I want to be able to, like, if my kids are like playing sports, like I want to be like coaching them. I want to be really involved, because my dad was there for me a lot. Like coached me in soccer, literally from like 5 to 12 years old. So it's like I want to be there, and like right now I wouldn't be. Like I just know I wouldn't be because of how hard we're pushing on different things that we're working on. So I just think time horizon, a few years out for that, but definitely want to get married, and we've been talking about that, and definitely want kids. Ideally 3 would be my choice, 3 boys, no girls. But but
No, man, girls.
Yeah, Logan needs a son.
hey,
Every man wants a boy, and then when you get your first girl, you're like, oh my gosh, dude, it's like it just melts you.
Yeah, so it's like, and then and so that I just don't have that perspective because I haven't been there, right? So that's what I want, but who knows what God will give me and say that that's what you needed, so that's what I'll take. But that personally, my health, I definitely want to. I've kind of yo-yoed a couple times where like I've gotten into really good shape through my 20s, and then like I've gotten to these stages of like very high stress, and then I just stop exercising, stop working out, and so I kind of had a little bit of that, where I was in like really good shape the year before last, and then I kind of fell out of it. Then I did a marathon in January this year, so I was running, but I still got skinny fat because I was just eating like a freaking butthole. But I still ran the marathon. Still, I'm gonna do a marathon every year. Like I really enjoy that challenge, the mental challenge of doing it. So outside of that, I have a personal trainer that I see 3 times a week. So for me, it's just dialing in the diet a little bit more. I've definitely gotten a lot better on it. It's just I need to eat more. So that's my challenge there, that I have to continue just getting better at. But those are kind of the personal ones. Like we're living in a house that was going to be a flip, and we'll probably stay here until rates go down a little bit, and then move into a bigger, like because this is like a $650 or $600,000 575 house, and we want to move to like a 1.5 million dollar house probably in the next couple of years, depending on what rates do. Mainly not because it's like I want $1 million house. I just want an acre. Like I want an acre where like I have a small guest house to just have some space, and we want to have like some like chickens and stuff to little gardens. So it's it's like stuff like that.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Yeah, if you guys don't follow Cody on Instagram, he posts sometimes. Actually, I don't know if
Dude,
I need to very much.
I need to post
story.
So I had my account get breached like last year, and I've been so scared to allow someone else to use my Instagram account to post that I haven't been. So like our media team does it on Paces, but I just haven't had them doing it on mine. I just need to like get over that and let them do it, so that's why that hasn't been happening, just FYI. And now with all the scammy people out there like trying to scam people with our accounts, like it has me more sensitive right now.
If Cody offers you crypto, you know it's him, because he's clearly trying to make money on crypto.
Please send me $1,000.
Yeah, I was catching you doing some personal training stuff in there. I saw you in the gym working, and that stuff is cool. And I think that there's a lot of value to that, just showing you live your life, right? Obviously, like you're growing businesses. I see Hayo repost stuff with you or post stuff with you, and then so I think the more of that stuff that you can show, because I've seen a little bit of it, but I would personally like to see more fitness, more high more business stuff, more like Cody insights. But with that being said, like Cody does post on social media, so go to his Instagram, Cody Barton Official, and don't feed the
I will
crypto.
never ask you for money. If anyone ever asks me
Crypto
for
news.
money around my name, it is not me. I will never do it.
So funny. Cody, thank you so much. Like, super appreciate you sharing your story and coming on here, and just like really just being a giver, but at the same time, like a high level entrepreneur and a high level human being, which is honestly much more important. Because ultimately, when you're a high level human being, you'll be a high level entrepreneur for as long as you continue to live and be on this planet, continue to play the game. And so just appreciate you sharing your story, and thank you so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Yeah, Cody, I have to say really quick, as a visionary who's building his business to scale, and like I'm running into a lot of these problems, the way that you approach things, the things that you've said today, I'm actually now in my business starting to see the value of asking those questions, of approaching the problems these ways, and to sit here with you for well over an hour, almost 2 hours. And so one, you've actually blessed us, and like everything that you said, I just keep taking it back. I'm like, oh crap, now I got to go. Like puzzle pieces are coming together, and that wouldn't have happened if you weren't so generous with your time. So, and this is the first time you and I have really been able to connect in a meaningful way. So I want to truly say thank you for hopping on with us. It's been amazing.
Definitely. Of course. It was a good time. I appreciate it, guys. It was a lot of fun.
It's awesome. So if you guys are listening, please go follow Cody Barton Official. This is the Origin Story Podcast. Sam Singh, thank you so much for being on here. Intermittently, on and off, but always showing back up. So happy Tuesday to you guys. We're out. Bye.